Hello everyone, how's it going? In this video I wanted to go ahead and show you how to make this exact scene in front of you. We are going to be using Blender as always, and our main focus here is showing you a general workflow that will help you create really solid images in no time. So if you are an architect or just a hobbyist, this will be extremely useful for you. Now as always, all of the necessary assets are linked down below for you to follow along. And if this is interesting to you, feel free to stay and follow along as well. Now we are going to be starting with a base mesh from the SketchUp warehouse, which you would find in the description as well. So go ahead and download this as a collada file or as a SketchUp file. After importing it, make sure to delete all of the extra grass and trees and start from scratch with a clean canvas. Now, what I want you to do is select an object, press Shift L, and choose Select Linked by Material, and merge all of these objects. So what will this do is take every object with the same material and merge it for you. I like the texture that came here as well, so I'm going to upscale it using a certain tool. I like Topaz Photo AI, but feel free to use any free alternative online. So just upload the image, go ahead and download it, and plug it into the actual scene. So as you could see, I will be using Topaz Photo AI. Extremely nice software, it's a must in my workflow at this point. I barely render at 4K anymore, mostly 2K and upscale upwards. And this time, I'm upscaling by the factor of 2. So it becomes a 4K image. As you could see, really nice details. Make sure to be playing with the enhancing presets and try which one looks better. There is no rule here. Feel free to ignore the graphics or natural low resolution. They don't really give too much information. And just go ahead with what looks better. So I like to add a suffix of high resolution and not add any prefix. So switch up the low res for the high res image and use it in your scene. As you can see, we've got a lot more detail. We are going to do the same process for the wooden veneer object. So Shift L, as you could see in the shortcuts, and Control G to merge everything into a single object. Now for the texture, go ahead and just find something off of the internet. It doesn't matter at all from where, as long as it looks okay. In this case, we won't even see much of it since the wooden blinds or stores are really tiny and thin for the most part. So you can even get away with just a simple solid color. In my case, I'm just using something off of the too many assets I have and the lot of textures that come with them. So plug it into the roughness and just skip the bump. You can go ahead and spend more time, add bump or add like a literal PBR workflow with the roughness and normals. We can do the same thing for our concrete as well. Color ramp, play with it to have some more variation in the roughness. And you can do the same thing with the bump. Just plug it into a bump and make sure that it's in the height socket so you don't have any shading or normal issues. Play with the distance, play with the strength until it looks good and makes sense. Same thing for the planks. As you can see in front of you, I will be just playing with the actual tiling and doing the exact same workflow of plugging the same image inside of the actual roughness slot and the bump slot. The really repetitive workflow, but it's a must and goes extremely fast. Now for our pond or type of water mesh, I'm going to be pressing X and limited dissolve to get rid of any unneeded vertices and topology, and extrude to give it some more thickness. You will understand in a minute why. Add the principal BSDF. We are coming back to this material. Do not worry. This is just a placeholder to help us with the composition once we add our camera. Now do the same thing, Shift L and merge by pressing Ctrl G. Give it a simple glass material You can spend as much time here. You can give some more roughness variation. You can add some imperfections, whatever floats your boat. And the more time you spend, the more details you give, the better the result would be. Now, this whole scene took me around 40 minutes. I highly recommend that you at least spend 4 hours, 3 hours on it. Try a lot of assets and make it look way better than I made it in 40 minutes, which was mostly spent on fixing the geometry. I will be showing you a real nice example of that at the end of the video as well. Now, for the metal of the beams, I'm going to be adding a noise texture. Play with its size, play with its detail, with the roughness, with the distortion, until it gives me a bit more variation to plug it into the roughness. No bump in this case as well, since I didn't really find that I needed it. If you added it, that would be totally okay. As a matter of fact, that would be great as well. Or just choose something off of the internet, Blender kit or anything that gives you really nice details. In this case, don't want to spend too much time. Don't be afraid to add any math nodes. It doesn't include any math. If you get scared of that, it's just an easy way to control the actual values by multiplying them if the color ramp doesn't give you enough control. Now, add our camera. We're going to keep the aspect ratio as is, 16:9, and play with the focal length and give it a focal length of around 20, which is an okay point. It doesn't really matter. For the height, 1.7 meters off of the ground will be a really nice point and gives us a eye level perspective. Now, same thing, merge the object with the same materials, play with the size, this is just back and forth. Make sure that everything is in harmony. And at this point, we need some lighting to see what we are doing as well. So, as you can see, before the lighting, I'm going to be adding a arced wooden bridge from Quixel Bridge. Since I do not like the one that we already have here, just import it from the Quixel Bridge and stick it where it makes sense, right? It gives us a little nice type of rustic look. These photogrammetry scans, you can't really beat their quality, you can't really beat the realism that they give you. Now, for the lighting, we are going to be using a sky texture. By now, if you follow my channel, you know how much I love the sky texture, how much control it gives me, how the lighting is extremely realistic, very fast. HDRIs are great, but they are not the only way, and oftentimes they do not have enough control. And if you want enough control, you need to download a lot of HDRIs or purchase an extremely expensive pack that would typically cost $100 or $200 per HDRI set, which gives you a lot of elevations, and gives you a lot of HDRIs per time. As you can see, I'm using the false color to see my overexposed values. Try to crunch them down a bit. Now, do not worry about the red too much. I'm going to be using AGX, which fixes this the slight bit. I don't like to use the exposure. I like to do everything inside of the scene by doing the lighting, making it not overexposed by itself without lowering the exposure. Now, I'm using AGX as always, as you should, unless Filmic looks better. If it does look better, use it. As you can see, back and forth playing with the roughness. And at this point, we need our landscaping act. So let's separate our grass designated areas and merge them with the other grass areas here. So this will allow us to actually go ahead and scatter. Now, before that, you want to apply the scale by pressing Ctrl A, since SketchUp files come with really bad scales, usually 0.01. So make sure that the scale is set to 1 by pressing Ctrl A. And let's scatter some grass using the GeoScatter add-on with the grass blade biome packs. You can use any free assets. You can use the free assets that come with geopack on the Blender market. I believe you can use your own, you can make your own, you can go ahead and use something from Megascans. You can even use the regular particle system or a geonode system. You don't need this add-on. I'm just showing you the fastest way to do that. Now, I repeat this every single video, but Geoscatter is amazing. It compares with Forest Pack, which I really love. Make sure to optimize the scene by applying the display proxy and limit the scattering to where you can see by enabling the cam optimization, and up the FOV boost. As you can see, we have some really solid grass in no time. Practically set up for us. The variation is okay, the rotation is okay, the scale is okay as well. After that, now we need some shrubs and some trees. So let's start by adding some shrubs from the Botaniq add-on as well. So I'm not using the actual add-on, I'm using the asset browser that comes with the actual add-on, just to add a couple. Now in this case, I like to use Alt-D to duplicate the actual geometry. Instead of giving us a unique duplicate, it does an instance, so it doesn't consume any more VRAM or RAM and doesn't need any more compute, so you can duplicate this countless time and the up and render times will be very insignificant, especially if you run out of VRAM. This is extremely important and crucial to do. So let's also add some trees. First of all, behind the camera in order to cast some really nice shadows and give us a type of gobo look. Now, obviously, actual trees are way superior to gobos unless you really know what you're doing and are advanced in making your own gobos. That way, a gobo will be, a lot more useful than an actual tree geometry, since you can have more control over this and you don't need to modify the tree or delete any of its leaves or any of its branches as well. Now, just try to add some trees in the scene. If you have access to better assets than the Botaniq, there are a couple of asset packs I'm looking to purchase later on, and we'll be mentioning them in the future as well. Botaniq is great, it's really nice, but they are way superior assets that are way heavier, but the quality deserves the actual drawback in performance. Now let's add a plane, which will be our backdrop, to scatter a couple of trees on top of it to give us a nice tree line and hide the horizon. As you can see, I'm giving it just a color to emulate grass, since I do not want any white values to bounce onto our trees and make them look too translucent. So I'm also adding some topology by subdividing the mesh and adding a displacement in order to emulate irregular terrain. Just play with the size of your cloud texture and you will get a really nice result. It's not subtle, but from far, it just is barely visible. Now, again, I'm using Geoscatter. This time, instead of Biome Scatter, I'm going to be using the actual density scatter option here. Make sure to select the geometry you want to instance on and choose a very low density to begin with to avoid crashing. Play with the rotation and the scale, apply some randomizing scale, go to the rotation, go ahead and use global Z in the alignment and 2 in the tilt, and leave the yaw to 360 degrees. Play with the density until it looks good. This is just eyeballing it. There aren't really any rules here. The single rule is have enough variation. If you want to go ahead and spend more time, you can definitely improve this greatly by adding color variation, by adding a lot of neat tricks here. So another thing I want to do is work on the pond. Now I want the murky look. Does anyone want a pond in his house that will attract bacteria and moths and, you know, all types of insects. No, but in a render it looks okay. So I'm going to be doing that, and I'm going to be making this slightly dirty. Not extremely dirty, but just slightly, to give a bit more interest and variation to the actual water mesh, since it takes up, you know, a fair bit of space from the screen. So I'm adding a noise to emulate very slight ripples and variations on the surface. You know, something really subtle, in order to disrupt the reflections and not have glass mirror-like reflections. You do not want that most of the time, unless you are going for that type of tranquil look. And even then you want just a little bit of bump. Now I'm adding also a different noise, playing with the coordinates, to add these type of like freckles, which emulate like dust or dirt or just particles, you know, whatever you want to call them. And it gives a nice result. So make sure to play with the roughness, to play with detail, to play with the distortion as well. And plug this into the transmission. So what will this do is give you the color that you actually go ahead and choose. And to get the murky look, I'm going to add a volume absorption. Give this volume absorption a greenish color, which I'm going to be showing you in a bit. And make sure to be working on this with your actual mesh, since it's really reliant on the reflections and refractions. So as you can see, I will be playing with the volume absorption color, given this a murky greenish deep color. Looks extremely interesting and nice as well. It needs more sunlight, which I'm going to be adjusting in a second here. So as you could see, really vibrant green color, type of mossy green color. So after doing that, we are going to be adding some lily pads. You can go ahead and do this by hand, adding a lily pad by hand, for example, adding one, adding the other, rotate, scale. This can be really useful since you have a lot more control over it. But I prefer to use the particle system that the nice team behind the Botaniq provided us with. So use the regular particle system, and to scatter this on, I want to scatter it only on the top, and the fastest way to do that is duplicate the face, separate it into its own unique object, and give it a new material, which will be fully transparent. So set the alpha in the principal BSDF to 0. This way it doesn't affect anything and doesn't cause any issues, and you can scatter on top of it without needing to specify a group, for example, on which it gets a vertex group where to scatter. And this is really nice way to, and you get to have way more control over the scattering. Now it looks really nice. If you would ask me to add some really nice subtle pinkish colors, some red hues, really interesting as well. So at this point, we already have a really solid image. You can add some shrubs, you could add some tropical grass, you can, you know, make this into a whole different mood, change the whole lighting setup, you know, just have fun with it. I also like the deep blue sky, so I'm going to duplicate our main lighting setup, which is a sky and the background node, mix these with the mix shader node, and add a light path node in camera ray, plug it as our mix factor, and add a hue saturation node as well. Up the saturation, play with the actual value, play with the hue, lower the value to get a darker color, which makes it more rich and less overexposed, and you will get a really nice result of a deep blue sky without it actually affecting your lighting, which would look pretty bad if you would ask me. We want to only see this. This is an option in, for example, if you're using 3ds Max, you will be enjoying this option here with the light rays. It gives you way more control and it is the equivalent of override. For example, in the render settings in the scene. Now play with the post processing, play with the look, play with the view transform. I recommend that you keep it at AGX, maybe Filmic if it looks better, I guess, but AGX is genuinely amazing. Try to use a photographer add-on or just use the built-in compositor to add some slight bloom and streaks, maybe add some distortion, maybe add some vignette. I'll highly recommend that you do this in Photoshop or Affinity Photo, but in this video I don't want to use any software other than Blender itself. So these are some really simple things, and we already have a really nice scene. Now I also want to show you recreations by Vincent. You know, he followed our tutorials a couple of times. He already is an amazing artist. He has some really solid art. You can go ahead and check his page. And if you want to be mentioned in the end of the video and featured, feel free to send me your result. I promise you that I check all of them, if you tag me, that is. And while you are there, make sure to check my own page here. Take a look at our works. You know, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them on the post or in the DMs. And as you could see, I check everything that you tag me on. Here, for example, this is really nice as well. I really love the way it looks. So until next time, enjoy yourself.